First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, Ba'ashem Kakudash. Yahweh is to this world ignorantly calls God. Yahushua is to this world ignorantly calls Jesus. Ba'ashem means in the name, Rakah means spirit, and Kodash means holy. And that's all in the Paleo Hebrew. Also, to give double honors to the elder bishops and apostles of Great Millstone that taught me this truth. Today's video, I wanted to go into how the Lord is going to give spiritual power to his believers. Okay, and this is part of the prophecies that are written, is that before the end, or in the times of the end, and after the end, spiritual power is going to be endowed. Now, what kind of spiritual power? That is, we can have our, interpretations, and scriptures say a couple things. But, we'll have to see the full totality. And the reason I say that is because it says in Jeremiah that the Lord is about to do something greater than what he's done before. So let's get that in Jeremiah chapter 16 and verse 14. It says, "Therefore, behold, the days come, saith Yahweh, that it shall no more be said, Yahweh liveth, that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. But Yahweh liveth, that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north, and from all the lands whither he hath driven them, and I will bring them again into the land that I gave unto their fathers." All right, so going into, the Lord is about to have a new title. He's about to have a new name, something that is going to overshadow what he did in ancient Egypt. And it's going to be the salvation of the Israelites from all four corners of the earth and from the land of the north, a.k.a. North America, Babylon the Great. Okay, and he is going to be the one that takes us back to the Holy Land. Now it says, "Behold, I will send for many fishers, saith the Lord, and they shall fish them. And after will I send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them from every mountain and from every hill and out of the holes of the rocks." Right, so the fishers are gone out right now, which is going into the fishers of men, the teachers, the prophets, and we're fishing the elect. Lord willing, I'm part of that number. And the hunters is part of that spiritual power. Right? In order to hunt, it's not just going to be a bow and arrow. The Lord's not going to have us out here with pistols, hunting these nations. No, it's going to be through straight spiritual power. Right? And we know 100% of the kingdom we're going to have that spiritual power. Right? Because it talks about how we're going to have those incorruptible bodies, right? Immortality. And when you go to Obadiah, the first chapter, and verse 18, it says, "In the house of Jacob," I'll start at verse 17, it says, "But upon Mount Zion shall be deliverance, and there shall be holiness, and the house of Jacob shall possess their possessions." Going into how we're going to be the ones on top, and these other nations are going to be on the bottom, starting with these Edomites. It says, "In the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for stubble. And they shall kindle in them and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for Yahweh hath spoken it." Right? So the Lord is going to use the house of Jacob and the house of Joseph, the Israelites, to bring judgment upon you nations. And like I said, that's not going to happen, with just, your modern day weapons. It's going to be a spiritual ass whipping for all nations. So let's go to a scripture now. Go into that Isaiah chapter 59 and verse 19. It says, "So shall they fear the name of Yahweh from the west, and his glory from the rising of the sun. When the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord shall lift up a standard against him." So the enemy coming in like a flood is going into this government, okay? Cracking on the believers, okay? Persecution. So when that happens, when things start tightening up, and as the scriptures say, many of you shall be thrown into prison, that ye may be tried. It says verbatim, "The devil shall throw many of you into prison, that ye may be tried. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life." So when that happens, the Lord is going to lift up a standard. Now, what does that mean? Right, a standard goes into a balance. Right? If wickedness is turning up, righteousness is going to turn up. And when you go into that word standard in the Hebrew, it goes into nous. Let's see.
Strong's H 5127. Nous.
It says nous, but it would really be, I'm not sure on that one, but it says to flee, escape, to take flight, depart, disappear, to fly to the attack or horseback, to drive at, to take flight, to put to flight, to drive hastily, to cause to disappear, hide. Right, and that right there is, go down here, vanish away. Okay, put to flight. So either we're going to be putting these, troops to flight by a, somehow, some way, strength. The Lord gives you a superhuman strength, or you'll literally be able to take flight and, take off. Or as it says right here, to disappear. Okay, invisibility. Okay, being cloaked. Okay, here it is. They're looking for you and you're hiding in plain sight and they can't see you. A movie that showed that was this movie, Declaration Day, if I remember correctly. It just came out, and when you watch the movie, there's a specific scene where the woman, or there's like these two, the main character, the woman and the guy, and they essentially have special powers. And the woman, she had the power essentially to do that. She would like hold on to everyone, and the house, all the people inside of the house, they went invisible. And here it is, that specific government agency was looking for them in the shed, exactly where they were at, and, they couldn't see them. So this is part of the faith that the scriptures talk about. Because, the first thing someone would think about is, if I'm going to be thrown in jail, if I'm going to be, persecuted, if they're going to say they're going to chop off my head and torture me, what am I supposed to do? That's where the faith kicks in, and remembering these scriptures that say that the Lord is going to lift up a standard, right? So the Lord is on our side. And another scripture, I haven't thought of the scripture in a long time. And I believe it was, right, 2 Kings chapter 6 and verse 13. So you had Elisha, and they're essentially they were going to go against a great army. And he said, verse 13, and he said, go and spy where he is, that I may send and fetch him. And it was told him, saying, behold, he is in Dothan. Therefore sent he thither horses and chariots and a great host, and they came by night and compassed the city about. And when the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, behold, a host compassed the city both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, alas, my master, how shall we do? Right, so they're surrounded with all types of troops. So they're like, hey, what are we going to do? And he answered, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. And Elisha prayed and said, Yahweh, I pray thee, open his eyes, that he may see. And Yahweh opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. And when they came down to him, Elisha prayed unto Yahweh and said, smite this people, I pray thee, with blindness. And he smote them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. So Elisha opened up the eyes of that servant and showed him, hey, there's more with us than with them. And he was able to see all the angels around them. So that's something that you always got to remember is we got angels, man. If you praying to the Lord via his son in sincerity and truth, okay, you got protection. There's nothing to worry about. Because the scriptures say that, he keeps us in all of our steps. So we're protected. And especially more when all hell starts breaking loose and society collapses. That's when we're going to need the most protection. And you think the Lord ain't going to deliver that? I always think if the prophecies of destruction are happening, how much more the prophecies of salvation are also going to take place. So let's get the scripture in Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 3 and verse 5. It says, and having been a little chastised, they shall be greatly rewarded. For God approved them and found them worthy for himself. As gold in the furnace had they tried them and received them as a burnt offering. Right, going into the elect. Right, and it's beautiful how it says that having been a little chastised, we're going to be greatly rewarded. So saying that what we're going through right now ain't shit. Right, your daily troubles and this and that, it ain't nothing compared to what we about to receive. Right, so that's why it says put off the weak nature, the mortal thoughts. I got to get that now. I got to get that. And Esdras, 2 Esdras 14 and verse 13, it says, now therefore set thine house in order and reprove thy people, Comfort such of them as be in trouble, and now renounce corruption. Let go from thee mortal thoughts, cast away the burdens of man, put off now the weak nature, and set aside the thoughts that are most heavy unto thee, and haste thee to flee from these times. For yet greater evils than those which thou hast seen happen shall be done hereafter. Right, so put off that weak nature, that doubt, that fear, okay? Because greater evils, okay, wicked times are coming. So going back to that Wisdom of Solomon 3, in verse 7 it says, and in the time of their visitation they shall shine and run to and fro like sparks among the stubble. Right, so think about that. In the time of our visitation, going into the day of the Lord, okay, the elect, those that have been tried, are going to be running among the stubble like sparks to and fro. Right, you see electricity, that's how it says we're going to be moving. And that ain't nothing natural, man. So think about the Flash, superhuman speed. That's what that's talking about, spiritual power. It says they shall judge the nations and have dominion over the people, and their Lord shall reign forever. Right, the kingdom of heaven. So, that's what's coming, and, it's written. And if it's written, then it's going to happen, as it says in Habakkuk. At the end it shall speak and not lie. So, let's get this in Zechariah chapter 12 and verse 8. It says, in that day shall Yahweh defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David, and the house of David shall be as God, as the angel of Yahweh before them. So what is that talking about? When it says in that day, it's talking about the ends. Okay, the end day. And if we're being defended, that means that we ain't in the kingdom. Right, so this is before the end. Okay, this is when it's going to happen. Because if we're in the kingdom, we're going to be the ones that are in the position of authority. The Israelites are never going to be the ones, beaten down again. So this is before the kingdom. In the near future, it says that the most feeble is going to be as David. So the weakest Israelite is going to be as David. What did it say about David? He said, I have run through a troop. I've jumped over a wall. David was out here moving with power. Now, that's just the most feeble. In the house of David, going into your prophets, 144,000, shall be as God, shall be as powers, as the angel of Yahweh before them. So the prophets, as it says, those fishers are going to become hunters. And spiritual power is going to be straight bestowed upon these men. So, this is beautiful to read. Another one came to mind. The water Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 30, it says, even the youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon Yahweh shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. So, imagine that, man. Mounting up with wings as eagles. We read that in Isaiah 59. Talked about he's going to lift up a standard, flying. They shall run and not be weary. Right? Imagine sprinting as hard as you can and not getting tired. Okay, walk and not fainting. Right? Unlimited stamina. That's part of spiritual power. Right? And spiritual power doesn't have to be, something insane. What if the Lord gives you spiritual power to read other people's minds? That would be a massive, advantage. So that's why I say that the Lord is going to do it in a way that is going to be beyond what we could possibly think. Okay. So, Spirit was on me to touch this topic after watching the brother's testimony on spiritual power and Apostle Tahar's testimony on spiritual power. And, this is a topic that's not really touched too much. I haven't touched it too often, but, that's the Spirit right now. So, hopefully this is edifying. Without and give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'Shem Yahushai, Ba'Shem Rakakudash, and double honors to the elder bishops and apostles of Great Millstone that taught me this truth. Shalom to your elect. Shalom.